within it. When it comes to the simplest of life, we can agree that when challenges lay down upon us, perhaps saints would respond to the challenges differently from a more lofty and philosophical stance. Commonplace sinners like us are likely to first react by hitting back in disbelief and rage with a why me before we gather the courage to fight back again and again and again till we overcome the affliction. Courage most of
लेट हो गए मैम
लाइट की हम
पावर कट पावर कट
आगे सर आगे 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 कट के आगे सर हाँ जी मैम
I'll rewind a bit. Perhaps saints would respond to the challenges differently from a more lofty and philosophical space. Commonplace sinners like us are likely to first react by hitting back in disbelief and rage with a why me before we gather the courage to fight back again and again till we can overcome the affliction. Courage, most of us know, is one of the most important ingredients for overcoming cancer. Unlike about 30 or 40 years ago, when cancer happened to someone who was known to a friend's relative, today most of us hold the hand of someone close who has cancer. Which makes popular actor Monisha Koirala's autobiography, Healed, a very relevant and inspiring read. Not to forget a very brave bearing of her personal struggles before her triumph over cancer. We invite Monisha Koirala to share some of her experiences with Satya Saran. Satya Saran is the editor of Femina for 12 years, has been the editor of Femina for 12 years, teaches fashion now, fashion journalism at NIFT, and is an author of many film biographies, including that on Guru Dutt, S.T. Burman, Jagjit Singh. I invite Monisha Koirala and Satya Saran to please come on the dais.
वो वेट कर रहा है देखो सिग्नल नहीं आ रही
Don, can you hear me? Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
And it's wonderful being here. I've had a fantastic 2.5 days. And I'm sure the rest of today will be wonderful too. And thank you, Monisha, for coming here and for deciding to share your life with us. I want to show you this wonderful book. I've read it not once but twice. I read it once when I got the book the first time, and I read it again because I was going to talk to you. And I want to ask you the first question, or even before that, I want to say that what I see in this book is a journey that anybody who has been afflicted with cancer goes through. But what makes it different is the fact that you have talked about it, you have internalized your feelings and then decided to expose them without any, rushing over, without hiding anything, your most vulnerable moments. And I see it not just as a physical and emotional journey, but a spiritual journey. Am I right?
Yes, thank you. And good morning to all of you. I want to thank KLF for inviting me here. And thank you, Saranji, for coming here and being with me on stage. Yes, this book has been first from the time of inception, the time of a lot of people have been asking me to write autobiography. I wouldn't call this an autobiography as such, because it's about the cancer journey, what all I went through during after cancer journey and how it impacted me and my family, and the whole process of fear and healing and of course embarking on it spiritually. And to me, this definitely is the most spiritual experience for me, because I used to go to spiritual places for meditation and a lot of masters, but this actually made me dive into of understanding of who I am and what I want to do and how important is spirituality to me.
I think what really hit me when I looked at the cover of this book is the title. You see, people, I have as an editor handled stories by survivors, and there's always this, why me? Or, oh, I survived it. God knows what will happen next. This is so positive. Yes. This is amazingly like, I got it, I finished it. So, was that your idea?
First of all, this whole thing, why me, doesn't happen to me because I've been through so many trouble. So if it happened first time, I could understand why me, but I think I had to deal with so many troubles, so I'm kind of used to having trouble in my life, and that never happened. Why me? I'm not a kind of a person also to feel victimized, and I think all of us have this ability to deal with the situation or the problems that we face, and I guess that it's just in my personality. And what I wanted to say, sorry, what was your question basically?
About the title?
Yeah, I love that. Actually, it was suggested by a friend, and I've been thinking, because I don't want to give this cancer memoir, the cancer journey, a negative twang. I wanted to give hope, because there are lots of people who have got cancer diagnosis and have come out of it. So I've been constantly focusing about positive. In fact, even when I did not know that I would be surviving, or what would be the quality of my life after this, I remember a medical student who had come to see me in New York hospital, not to see me, but they were in the process of checking a lot of other patients, and they were interacting with other patients as well, and she interacted with me. And I said, after this treatment, I'll be done. I'm fine. I'm going to be fine. And it was the last stage cancer, and she knew, of course, and she had, confused expression on her face that, she in her senses. So, but I think, I always believe that I'll be fine out of this.
But reading the book, it's a little bit of a roller coaster ride, because
Absolutely.
you go up into the peaks of hope and then you sink into despair. In fact, your first chapter ends with this very poignant line, I think I'm dying, right?
Yeah.
So how did you get out of that phase?
It's never been a consistently positive. We are human beings, creature of mind, which always oscillates between this and that. And so there are phases where I was gripped in fear. And there were times when my doctors could not tell me, because I used to ask my doctors, doctor, how long do I have? Will I survive this? And I just wanted to be mentally prepared. So I used to ask my doctors constantly. And when my doctors slowly after my operation, actually, this is a whole thing which I've written it in this, where after my operation, when my surgeon, Dr. Chi, couldn't even tell me if I would survive for how long, that's when I just had a sinking feeling that probably this is end of me.
So sometimes doctors, in trying to be frank and not give you false hope, give you despair.
I think that's the one quality which every patient deserves, is honest,
Right.
not to sugarcoat it. Be polite as much as possible, but if it's
Be positive.
but be honest.
Yeah,
I think every patient deserves that respect, that dignity, to be told exactly what situation she or he is in.
But there is a lyrical quality in your book, which I found, where you grasp at symbols. There is a eucalyptus tree, you see. There is a little baby bird struggling that you see. You see a butterfly in a jar, and each one speaks to you. Tell us about that.
Well, I love metaphors, and I love how it can sometimes describe emotion when there are not enough words to describe what you're going through. So metaphors is a huge, I feel, tool to tell a story. So I've used that in many places, and whenever there was hopelessness in terms of right after my diagnosis, when I saw a fallen eucalyptus tree. Nepal at one time had many eucalyptus trees, by the way. This whole expansion of the roads and all, a lot of trees have been cut, and so I saw one of them lying down, and so I was thinking of the dead tree and my cancer diagnosis, somehow that, and then I saw a little small branch which was trying to survive.
Which gave you hope.
Which gave me hope. So, and the butterfly in the jar again is the claustrophobic this situation. So, yeah.
No, it makes the book very lyrical, and it lifts it beyond just a memoir of a journey through cancer. I'm
so pleased you've read my book twice.
Yes. And you see, I remember a lot. I'm not even looking at the notes.
I was a little nervous about that.
No, I do my homework. What struck me when you were talking before the diagnosis of your disease was that you were very concerned about getting older. You said, oh, my body is losing shape. Now, this is something that hits all of us. The moment you cross 30, you start looking for grey hair. The moment you cross 35, you start looking for something else. I'm looking for cataracts just now. But especially when you're in the glamour business. Or
absolutely, bang on.
Yeah,
it
really gets you.
How we are perceived, how we are looked upon, and I was so scared of, people looking at me with pity and saying, hi, kya thi aur kya ho gayi, all that. I was constantly scared of that.
But what happened later, put all that on this one side, that's something I think every reader in the book will take back. That, okay, we are worried about these little things, but there are bigger issues that may crop up.
There were a few things around this topic, around this question I want to talk about. Firstly, the fact that I'm a woman and I'm an actress, how important it is for us to look nice and be perceived as beautiful and glamorous. It is part of our job, and somehow we kind of identify with how people perceive us. So though it's a spiritual experience and practice to detach from that, but anyways, so here I want to talk about the phase that you mentioned is when I was falling sick. Because I was uneducated about my health and my well-being, and I had no clue about my body. body always gives signs when there's something wrong, and we do not know how to listen to it. So we ignore it. So that's exactly what was happening with me. My stomach was bloating. I was falling sick consistently. Normally, I would get cough and cold, and I would be fine after taking paracetamol or some kind of medication. But here I was having this cough and cold and fever continuously for a couple of weeks. And I kept on thinking it's just cough and cold. And my stomach was bloating, so I was giving it thinking that, oh, I've had an unhealthy lifestyle, maybe it's showing bad, or I'm aging, so maybe it's part of that. But I had no clue that there was a cancer growing in my stomach or in my ovaries. So anything which is prolonged and happens, we need to really pay attention and get an early checkup and early diagnosis, because cancer caught early, there's a cure to that, and cancer caught late, there is no, you have to.
That's something that we have to tell ourselves every day.
Yes, absolutely. I think medical checkup after crossing certain age is periodic medical checkup is something very important. We should not really ignore that. There is another thing which I want to talk about is about as I said, I had this fear when after the treatment there was no hair on my face and I was bald. There was no eyelashes, no eyebrows, nothing. And so I was returning back to Mumbai. So I had this fear of how people will perceive me, and that, I've written in the book that I would say that, hi, abhi kaisi dikhne lag gayi hai, pehle kaisi thi. So I was really scared. So I used to put a hoodie on or a cap on. I would be looking on the ground and walk. And I had started doing this early morning walks around my apartment in Mumbai. So I used to just go down and fearful of what people will say, fearful of what I will see in their eyes. Will they be pitying me, judging me, condemning me? So I used to just look down and do my thing. Until somebody who was early morning he was cycling by past me and say, hey Manisha, and I just fearfully looked up, and he said, he gave it 2 thumbs up, and he said, God bless you, and I just realized how human beings are kind. Human beings are not that cruel and not that judgmental. So I saw a beautiful side of humanity. And everywhere when I started looking up and looking, watching in their eyes, I saw encouragement and blessings. And so I really started seeing a lot of positivity rather than the fear that I had that I'll be judged.
Actually, I want to share a small story with you all about Manisha when you had lost your hair. I was helping a friend, Zakia, a common friend,
Absolutely.
with a book. And we shot Manisha in some very beautiful pictures, bald, wearing her clothes, looking ethereally beautiful.
Yeah,
I think
beautiful
it was the inner beauty shining, the hope, the courage that I can do this and I'm not afraid.
Yeah.
I think that was wonderful.
Thank you, Sakar.
Yeah.
Zakia is so gifted photographer.
Yes, she is. I wanted to also ask you, there was a point when I think the turning point in your story comes when Zakia, since we're talking about Zakia, I'm jumping one question. When she tells you when you're going off to America, she gives you her Burberry jacket.
Yes.
And says you can return it to me when you come back.
Absolutely.
And you saw the hope in that.
Absolutely.
That you would come back.
Yes.
Right?
Zakia really rose up to the occasion, and she was somebody who really gave me a lot of encouragement, because that's another thing I think it's important to talk about is somehow we tend to give unsolicited advices to people who are suffering, really knowing the pain or the actual situation they're going through, out of kindness, I guess. But there were many people who were surrounded me, were doing all sorts of things and all that. But it was Zakia who had her sister or somebody close to her gone through this whole thing. So she actually, very hesitantly, she came up and had given me this amazing recipe, healthy recipe and healthy lifestyle. She's the one who taught me a couple of things. She said, Manisha, when chemo is coming on to your body, don't mentally reject it. Accept it and say it's vitamin shots. And I used to literally do this to myself, really psych myself and believe it that it's the vitamin shot, and it worked. And this, honestly speaking, my uncle who recently is got treated for third stage of lung cancer in Mumbai, I told him the same thing, that take it as a vitamin shot, and he really, he went through the whole treatments beautifully. He's cancer free. So I think mental, this thing is a lot of importance, much more important than we actually know how we perceive things and how strong we are mentally. That really impacts our physical body, I feel.
Brings me to another point when we're talking mental and spiritual, is the Maori lady who came and gave you a valuable piece of advice. What was it?
Yeah, I mean, this is another thing which I'm really curious, and I really would want to know more about these ancient cultures, and they have some wisdom which science still has to catch up to it. It was really, my experience was with this Maori healer that I used to fall sick before my diagnosis, 4 or 5 months prior to that. Like, I would fall sick, I would have fever and cold for a long period of time, and so I was going through this various alternative healing because the medical doctors were giving me paracetamol and giving me medication for the cold and cough, which was not really working. So a friend of mine had hosted Maori healers in her apartment. So among other things that I was trying out, I tried this also. So mother and me and another friend, we went to her house, and the Maori healer, the older Aboriginal lady, was scanning my mother, and the younger one was scanning my body. And they don't touch you, but they scan above your body. And she stopped right above my ovaries, and she said, your ovaries are red hot, and you are really angry with your ovaries. And I really didn't understand the lingo. I didn't understand what she was trying to say to me. So I said, all right, so what does that mean? And what do I do? So she actually said, send loving energy to your ovaries. And trust me, I mean, although I was trying this alternative thing, I really was, at the bottom of it, I really didn't believe it. So on the way back, and I was thinking, oh, this is again one of those hogwash. Till 6 months, 7 months later, I had cancer in the ovaries. And so there is a certain wisdom which we don't know yet. There is certain wisdom in ancient cultures, and so there's nothing to laugh about, something to really investigate and find, something serious, I think. Anyways, after my cancer diagnosis, and when I was in New York, it suddenly struck me that time, and I tried to contact them somehow. And then that's too late. They said, we can't do anything, and now we'll send you prayers, but you are in the medical this thing now. Here they backed off.
Yeah, they do the diagnosis.
They do the diagnosis. Yeah.
But actually, I know it happens in every family when someone is sick with something serious, which could kill. We try everything in the book, from prayer to going to faith healers, to going to pundits, to temples, and of course the doctors, and all kinds of alternative medicine. Now, your mother did a mantra for you, which you do believe did a lot of good. Yeah. Tell us about that.
Well, I created my own mantra. So, because I basically, my mother have a strong faith. And so she had done this Mahamrityunjay puja at home in Kathmandu right after my diagnosis. My cousin and Panditji, who was in my family, and he organized. Actually, my mom carried that Rudraksh from that havan to New York, and while Dr. Chi was operating, she requested him to have it in his body, and he did keep it. He kind of sterilized it, and he kept it with him, and And after my operation was successful, the first thing he told my mom, "Here, your Rudraksha has really worked." So it was really sweet of him, and he's adorable. And my mother used to do Mahamrityunjay japas a lot, and I used to do many, but I would say I created my own kind of japa, about healing and constantly talking and being positive and constantly talking about health and healing rather than focusing on sickness. I started focusing on healing and being healthy. So I shifted my whole thing from a negative to the positive and hopeful situation.
Yeah, but also you concentrated a lot on the very interesting people you were meeting. You have given very intricately characteristic accounts of doctors, of nurses. Would you want to share some of that?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I was going to, this whole thing was right after my surgery. I was in the hospital for 10 days, and so I realized this is my world. The nurses and the doctors are going to be my world for God knows how many this thing. So I started becoming friends with them, started talking to them, and understanding them, and talk to them many things. And I tried. I think I have written here. I tried to use Bollywood card with them, trying to get extra blanket and so stuff like that.
You had to tell them you were a Bollywood star, and then suddenly everything changed.
I guess, yeah. So I remember leaving the whole hospital after 10 days, and I was distributing the flowers to everybody, and I wasn't sure if I will live enough longer to say thank them later on, or I'll be gone. But I thought, whatever I want to do, I just want to give more smile and happiness to everybody else.
I'm going back to a question before you went into hospital. Is that when everybody was taking decisions that you're not going to be, you have to have this operation, you mustn't have this operation, it's complicated, it's life-threatening, and they were deciding, should we do it in Bombay, should we take you to USA? You said there was a certain feeling of everyone discussing me.
Yeah.
How about someone asking me,
Yeah, I think being a patient with a serious diagnosis, you become really helpless, and in a way it's a little relaxing because everybody else is taking charge of you. You're the one who normally is a decision maker and looking after everybody. For the first time somebody else is doing it. Sorry, but it's kind of uncomfortable initially, and I soon realized that this is how it's going to be for a longer period of time, that each one of the family members and the close family friend would be taking decision on that.
Actually, what I read into it was that you are used to making your own decisions. You've been living life on your terms for a long time.
Absolutely, that's true.
And suddenly that's taken away from you, so you resent it. But then you realize
uncomfortable.
This is care, this is concern. So it's not really taking away power. It's letting you be who you are.
It's also for me. Most important thing for me. I kind of realized to surrender to the situation.
Right.
To not always be proactive and pro this thing, but actually be and let things take its own course. And if people are showing up and rising up to the occasion, and everybody else is taking, I started the whole process for me was not always be the doer, but let situation and people take decisions.
So in any cancer situation, there is the operation, there's a diagnosis, there's the operation, and then of course there's the chemo. And your chemo journey had again its own issues. There was coming to terms with the pain, with the discomfort, with whatever happened to you. Then there was a crisis in the middle when you had to be rushed into emergency. When you look back now, what do you think of that segment of your journey?
There are a few things that comes to my mind. Again, I want to repeat this. I did not know how strongly the mind, how mind perceives the body is responding to. My first chemo was actually a disaster because I started bursting into reaction out of fear. Though I knew that I have to take it positively, but I had a lot of fears. And so the body responded it. And I started getting allergic reaction to the chemo I was taking in. And somehow, because my oncologist, Dr. Macker, was really persistent, strong-headed, she knew exactly what she was doing. She didn't deter, and though I was suggesting change, all that, but she stuck on to what is good for my body. And I slowly also had to give in to the fact that, okay, she's the doer, she's the one who's in charge, and basically that what comes to my mind, that I learned to surrender there. And I also noticed how my fear was showing in my body and was rejecting the best chemo that was good for me, and it's not chemo's journey. Chemo basically kills the cancer cell, but it also kills the good cells in your body. So a lot of white cells gets destroyed, so your body is weaker. And so I also got susceptible to the infection and all that. During infection, I was kept in where, I don't know what you call, quarantine, and the whole feeling of fear and again loomed onto me, thinking that probably I'll die with infection, because there was some model I had read in UK had actually died of infection. So again there and again, so there are high points and there are low points. It's a roller coaster ride. And that was the time I met this amazing lady called Dr. Navneet Narula. And that time was working in Cornell Hospital, and she used to come every Sunday and spend the entire day with me. And I was not sure why she was doing that, because she wasn't somebody that was my old friend. She had just got to know me during my cancer diagnosis in New York. And so I asked her one day, I found it really, I was quite this thing. So I asked her, I said, Zina ji, her pet name was Zina. Zina ji, why are you doing this? You're not my fan and you're not my friend from the past, this thing. So, and you spend your entire Sunday with me. And you're a busy woman, you're a doctor, you'd rather be with your kids and family and relaxing, but you're here in the hospital. And the answer that she gave me was so poignant, so beautiful. I always take her and give this example, and the thing that she told me was, Manisha ji, I do this so that you can do this to somebody else. And I really think that's the crux of our humanity, is to be present for somebody else without any other motive, but to just be there and be supporting at that minute. So I learned a huge lesson from there, and I vowed to myself that whenever I see somebody in need, I'll be present, I'll do my best at that minute, that point.
Actually, we don't realize it, but counseling of the family after someone in the family is afflicted is as important. Your family stood by you. Yes. A lot of families go into their own tailspin.
Yes.
They're not able to cope with the fact that they may lose a loved one.
Yes.
After the loved one has come back, they feel the trauma even more, because there's this whole healing process, the entire demand of their patience and their support. How was your healing process?
The family goes through a lot more, I feel, than the patient, because family is helpless. They're watching you and they're helpless. So I think the kind of trauma they go through, which is really a lot more, I feel. And my parents and my brother went through a lot more trauma. And but I was so lucky to have them, consistently standing by me, being there for me, and I'm really grateful for that. And mind you, I want to again share this, really important, is that I have asked various doctors, and I asked them, so doctors, why do some patients do well and why they don't do well? Some patient with the same diagnosis and same this thing, why some people do well and why some people don't do well? So they said there are various other things, but the important thing is the support system is really important. Patients who do well, they have good family support or friend support. So it's the whole healing process, the whole sense of community, the sense of family is really, really important.
The vibes that reach out to you all the time.
Absolutely. Emotional support, mental support. As I said, we don't know how strong our mental and emotional bodies are to our physical body. It's a kind of dependable thing. Mind, body, spirit are interconnected and intertwined in a very mysterious ways, and I realize that.
I'm going to flash back a little to your pre-cancer period when you were at the top of your career. You've done some wonderful roles, wonderful movies, offbeat roles. Now your life then was very different.
Right.
Do you want to give our listeners a glimpse into that life and how you have changed today?
Yeah. Basically, when I got into movies, I was right out of my school and very young. Saudagar was a huge success, and then many big filmmakers, Pailaj Nilani ji, Feroz Khan Saab, and Vinod Chopra. I got success very earlier on, and I got this whole circle. How Bollywood is, how our glamour industry is, or anybody very young, immature person getting success and money. So I got lost into all that. I feel, somewhere, though I don't have any regrets, because I believe each and everything leads you to where you are right now, and where I am right now, I'm very happy with that. So it's not complaining, but it's my honest confession that I was mentally, emotionally very immature. And so the whole thing, that whole glitter and the glamour was actually taking a toll on my life, and the whole lifestyle was unhealthy. And if there is a situation where you're going up, and there are times when you start falling down, and I was in a denial. I was not mature enough to accept the situation I was in. So there was this slowly, roller coasterly, this whole thing, I was falling down. And I fell flat on my face when I had cancer diagnosis, the last stage of cancer, and my marriage had failed, and my relationships in the past had failed, and I didn't have any, by the end of it, I didn't have any film career also. So everything in my life had actually fallen apart when I got the diagnosis. And the cancer diagnosis also was very, scary, because it was last stage of cancer. I thought I had lost it all. And it was when I thought that I was going to die and that this is the end of it. And I had long period of time in hospital bed, alone, introspecting what actually happened. How did I land up here? And so I started reflecting back, and I started looking back, and then I realized the kind of mistakes I had done or wrong steps I had taken. And then I was in a situation, I said, either I could just dwell in sorrow and cry my heart out and pity me and why me and all that, go into that zone, or I start dreaming, okay, now if I get a second chance to life, what quality of life I would want to have. So I started dreaming, and I started mapping my life in my head with that kind of a vision, that okay, if I get well, I'm going to do this right. What I'm going to do, if I'm going to well, I'm going to do that well. So I kind of mapped out what are the areas which were important to me. My family, my health, my work, my environment, all these things became very clear. So I started focusing on building each and every basket that were important to me. And today I'm in the process of achieving all that right.
Wonderful, wonderful. God bless you. So have you learned to love your ovaries?
Not only they were, this is again very funny situation. I want to share this with you. So Maori healers had told me to send loving energy to my ovaries. Now after my operation, there were no ovaries in me. There are no ovaries in me. So in one of the, I used to do many things. Besides, I knew that I have the world's best doctors and world's best parents, and who's cooking me at 4 in the morning. She would get up and cook me this haldi and doodh and all those things that mothers do. So my mother used to be in the kitchen since morning. So I had the world's best care at home and at the hospital, and I had to do something on my own. So what I used to do was this healing chanting that I used to create on my own, and then I remembered that my Maori healers had told me that to send loving energy to the ovaries, and not only ovaries, the whole body. I used to send, and my mother, one day she walked into my bedroom, and I was just doing my mantras and japas, and she looked at me, Manisha, what are you doing? So I said, Ma, remember Maori healers? They told me to send loving energy to the ovaries, and I'm sending loving energy to the ovaries. She said, but your ovaries, you don't have ovaries. I said, never mind, the space is there. So, yeah, I had many funny stories during cancer. So
you were sensible enough to see the funny side of things too, and that's probably what let you, emerge out of it like a beautiful butterfly. Yeah? I want to ask you as a writer, this always is a question that strikes me, that your book is with Neelam Kumar. Now, Neelam Kumar does say that you read every line, you changed things.
Right.
But how was your partnership? How did you work this partnership out?
Right. See, Neelam is a genuinely very gifted writer, and she herself is a twice cancer survivor. And if you meet her, she is beautiful, she's glamorous, and you will not even think that she has dealt with something twice. And so she came on board very late, but she is the one who helped me to finish this book. Prior to her, I had two other beautiful, amazing women who supported me in this whole process. I'm not a writer, I'm just a storyteller, and I tell stories from my life. But somebody who has the knowledge of and has the practice of writing has supported me, and I'm really grateful for those two women, and especially to Neelam.
But you were making notes anyway. You were writing little fragments of your impressions, your thoughts, your innermost feeling.
I had a Tibetan teacher visiting me in New York, who's from Kathmandu, and he took me to dinner with my bald head in New York, and he told me, Manisha, please make notes, because whatever you're going through, you will forget. Once you're well, you'll forget. So make notes, and whatever you're learning now are going to be the gems for the rest of your life. And after that, I started making notes, and I started doing all that, and being mindful of each and every experience that I was having, and would note whichever I thought was worth translating into my...
No, but it's amazing that you did that, because one says, forget it, what am I doing this for? And then those notes formed the basis of the book.
Yes.
And that's why it is so real.
Right.
It is, you remember things in such detail.
Right.
And that it makes it a really a self-help book, besides being the story of your journey. Anyone can take, not necessarily someone afflicted with cancer or having a heart problem, anyone who's going through a tough patch.
Right.
Emotionally, it could be the loss of a child, it could be the loss of a parent, it could be a divorce. I think even for them there are lessons here.
Yeah, I feel, because I've been through many tough situations in my life, and also, cancer really taught me how to value everything, and I redefined everything and started seeing life from a different perspective, and so it taught me a lot. And it really helped me that Neelam had gone through similar crisis and similar challenges, and she has a positive outlook towards life.
Right. And I really wanted the vocabulary.
Absolutely, and I really wanted though it's a cancer memoir, cancer journey, I wanted to focus on positive side of the journey. with the reality of the pain that we go through during the whole diagnosis and chemo and everything, because I feel, life is full of contradictions, and contradictions are beautiful. And being honest about the whole thing is also beautiful. So,
Before I ask you to read a little bit from the book, one last question, which I'm sure everybody in the audience is very keen to know. What are you doing in films now? I know you have some roles.
yes, I didn't realize how much I missed acting and how much I loved cinema. And I am a film buff, actually. I love cinema. And so one of the promises I had made during my cancer diagnosis, that if I get well, I'll focus on doing good work. I'll focus on enhancing my craft and work hard. So now I really live by that, and I was lucky enough that in my late 40s I got chance again in working in good cinema. I have finished a couple of movies. This year I finished 2 really interesting projects, one with Netflix, one American independent film I finished. And prior to that I finished a small role, but it was really interesting, in Sanju. And I did Love Stories for Netflix. And next year again I have some interesting projects. And yeah, I really work hard. I love what I do, and I'm blessed that I got opportunity to work again. I'm grateful for
I don't
that.
see why not. You're a gifted artist. Everybody remembers you in Dil Se and Khamoshi, and come on.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You've got everything going for you.
Absolutely.
But has your attitude to a role changed?
Absolutely. It has changed. I live for that time when I'm working, and I'm at my peak state when I'm working. And in fact, my directors and all now, I just finished a film called Maska Pav. I just finished a film and the director kind of said, even after I would say, okay, Manisha would want to still do it one, then I would start questioning, why did I say okay? So I am now really a perfectionist, and I enjoy the process, and I love it.
And you look at it in a much more mature way.
Absolutely, and I love it. There's a maturity, but there's a childlike quality of loving what I'm doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Would you like to read from the book?
Sure.
You decide what you want to read. I have no suggestions.
I need glasses nowadays.
Yeah, we all do. Nowadays children are wearing glasses at age 4 and 5.
Okay, this first 2 lines and then I'll go back. I'll choose another one. So this is really my favorite, is, to you, my dear reader, may you realize your limitless human potential and rekindle your inner spirit to face every challenge life throws at you.
That is the real spirit of the book. Yeah. Maybe you could read that, why you wrote the book, Or that, or even the prologue. Both are very beautifully written.
I grow silent, dear soul, you speak, Rumi. I don't want to die, I texted my friend in desperation. The feeling of being engulfed by darkness was fast descending on me. Even as I choked and struggled to fight it, darkness clutched at my throat, cutting off the light. Then it traveled swiftly, sweeping ruthlessly through my body, and finally settled into the pit of my stomach. I panicked at the old memory of feeling abandoned. It had happened to me at age 8, when my mother left me at my grandmother's house in Banaras and simply walked away. Wide-eyed, I had remained standing there, waiting for her to look back and take me in her arms. She never did. Why didn't you turn, Amma? I asked her many years later. Because, my little one, I did not want you to see me get teary eyes. It was only years later that I understood why she had left me there. She was helping out my father in Nepal's mounting political activities and knew that my grandmother, who had ably raised several children, would look after me well. Of course, with time, I had understood my beloved mother's situation and the wisdom of what she had done back then. But could I shake off the feeling of abandonment imprinted on my young soul? No. I felt a similar tinge of desertion when my marriage failed. I had tried my best to make it work and it collapsed heavily on my soul. But we were just two very different people, not meant to be with each other. Why did I always end up choosing the wrong guy? I fretted over what the world would say, that I could not even handle a marriage well. The fear of being abandoned had chased me all my life. This fear, however, was unlike anything I had experienced before. It was the fear of being abandoned by life itself.
I'm going to, we have 15 minutes for questions. But before I throw the floor open to questions, I want to say, Manisha, your name you say means Saraswati. And you say in your book that you hope to find the Saraswati in you. I think you also found the Durga.
Thank you.
Can we have questions? Please, can we limit it to questions and not essays?
My name is Mahesh Sagar. First of all, I would like to congratulate you for your brilliant talk and very inspirational talk. This has really given a good sort of inspiration to everyone how you led your life in such difficult situation. But my question: did you ever go for thinking that in a positive way? Like I'm going to be all right. I'm going to be all right. This is one mantra which, of course, did you ever get the feel of that I'm going to be all right? Because, and the other thing is, did you go for your future? Anybody what's written in your life? Did you go for it? Thank you.
You mean to consult an astrologer?
When you go in such a situation,
Yeah, I think I did everything possible under the sky. So of course I did that, but I am a believer of co-creating with God. So I believe in human efforts also. Of course the destiny matters, but human efforts are also important, and co-creation is also really important. Thank you for the compliment that you gave me. I of course went through the roller coaster ride of not believing and then believing and being positive. So, but mindfully, I would always, if the fear would take me to the really hollow and scareful place, I would mindfully bring myself up and look for hope and believe and all that. So I was oscillating.
Did you get the feel of that? There's one thing, like you said, body, mind, soul.
Yes.
Corrected? Body, mind, intellect, and soul. Did you get the feel of that? I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm not the intellect, but I'm the soul. Did you get that feel every day?
I try to. It's very difficult to reach that space. But people do talk about in the spiritual world. They do talk about that, and I tried. I was trying everything.
That's the best thing to do.
Anyone else, please? Yeah, right behind you. Can you hand the mic behind you?
Hi Manisha and Kiran Chadda. Those of us who are in 60s, 70s and perhaps some in the 80s here, they all fear death. And I have my sisters who are in the 80s and they always say कि पता नहीं क्या हो जाएगा. You've been almost near that and come back. I just want to know what's that feeling of fear?
For me what was really, this whole takeaway from this experience was that in my living years, I should be, when the time really comes to me, I should gracefully go. And that's a practice I try and get to, a space where dignified death is what is acceptable to me, not fearful death. So when I had cancer, I had a lot of fear. So it's my spiritual practice now to when it comes to me now, I should be ready and, just go with dignity. Death has fascinated a lot of people, and it fascinated me. So I also read this Tibetan book of living and dying, and so many other books and many other things. I guess the whole thing is being present, and there are times when you are a doer, but there are times when you are surrender. So the intelligence is to know when to do what.
Lovely. That's a beautiful answer.
Thank you for sharing such inspiring anecdotes. I saw my father battle cancer, so my question is, you talk of the Maori healers and the Mahamrityunjaya jap. So at a stage when doctors just give up and they say medically they can't do anything more, at that stage, does faith in whatever you believe in actually can it make cancer go away?
That's a huge question, and I can't give you an answer to that. But I believe what I've noticed is, at least in my case, I can't talk about other cases, but at least in my case, belief helped me, faith helped me, being positive helped me when I'm surrounded with negative reality, with a lot of trauma, with a lot of this thing, but I was constantly looking at positive and forcing myself out of this negativity and trying to be positive and trying to be hopeful even in that situation. So for me it has helped. And like I said, I used to, what my japa was? My japa was that I'm healed, I'm cured. So I would somehow do this and I would look into the mirror and I would look into my eyes and I would do all these things. So I think everything has helped me. So from my experience, I would say yes, it does. And I also realize how mind, body are interconnected, intertwined, and it listens. The body listens to what your mind says. I feel that's my experience.
Thank you so much.
The gentleman there.
Hello Manisha ji.
Namaskar.
My name is Sandeep Bagga. आप जब when you said that you send love signals to your body, do you do it with some method, or you simply sing ilu 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 ilu?
You are absolutely right in the shortcut. Okay, it's a good nickname.
It's not a question. I have gone through similar situation and I salute you with both hands.
Thank you so much, and I salute you. I know how difficult it's been.
Manisha ji, I'm also a survivor and we work together for an NGO in Chandigarh. And we would like, we have so many survivors there that we would like you to come to Chandigarh and help us out. Secondly, I just want to know, Dr. Narula, was she a survivor or she had a patient in her family whom she had helped out?
Such a good, intelligent question.
Yes.
She was a survivor of 10 years.
Yeah.
So she knew exactly what I was going through herself, probably 10 years back.
She's a 25-year, I'm also a 25-year survivor.
Wow, congratulations. Congratulations.
At the back, right there.
Thank you so much for the very, very inspirational talk. I just want to ask you, can you elaborate a little more about your transition into being more spiritually aware?
Okay. So before my diagnosis, I used to go to this place and couple other places for spiritual practices, and been to Vipassana, been to Oneness University, been to many other ashrams and all that. And I think I would do that superficially and come back to my normal everyday life and forget what I learned. I was not able to imbibe that in my everyday life. But when I got cancer, I had 2-3 other things which really helped me. One was the fact that I had teachers coming from Kathmandu to Mumbai who were helping me heal after chemo and becoming all right. So I started, we were doing meditation, different methods. Each person, one was following Osho's method of meditation. So we would translate that into every day. Like 3 times I would do meditation and had satsangs and talk about life and talk about what he said about I'm not the body, I'm not this thing, I'm the spirit, I'm the soul, I'm the energy. So all that. And then I also went and stayed at the Oneness University for 6 months. And I decided I will not budge from there till I got the essence of that space, so that teaching. And so I today, how that has translated me is basically I apply that in my every moment. Every time that I face challenge, I don't react, but I respond. I am able to bring the teachings of that place into my personal environment here. Because life over here it's a great school, I feel, because we are constantly faced with challenges and constantly faced with troubles and, emotional, financial, workplace or whatever, and if one can really bring the teachings of whatever spiritual masters one is following, whether it's Tibetan Buddhism, whatever, if you can use that into your personal space, then you don't really have to get swayed with the problems that you're facing. You are basically taught and equipped with certain tools. You apply that in your everyday, and make this whole journey into a beautiful journey with the problems in it.
I think the most important statement there was that you don't react but respond. We are now in a state when each of us reacts first and thinks of responses much later. Very valuable statement. Yeah.
Good morning, ma'am. I'm Shraddha. Congratulations on your journey. And I think we all want to live in a world where cancer is just a zodiac sign. My grandfather has gone through the same, so he used to always say that I wish I could have done this, or I wish I could do this before I go for my chemo, or if I survive or not. Was there one thing that you wanted to do if you had that little, despair in you that I might not be able to make it? So that's one thing that I want to do.
There was various things that that's what, when I was faced with death, so that's what had happened to me, and then I started looking back into my life and say, how would I live? What did I, I didn't really value life. I didn't value health, and I realized how important it is. This life, this present moment, this air that we are breathing, the sky that we are having, the sun that we are having, everything is a gift. It's something that we really take it for granted. But we are so lucky to experience all this. And trust me, my whole looking at life changed. And my relationships, my parents, they were giving me so much of love. My work, I had such a beautiful career. And so everything was important to me after. And I started one by one building everything back, and which I had lost. My health, my relationship, my work, everything. So I started rebuilding everything from scratch, and everything I value now. Really, my work, I'm 100% present in my work. My relationship with my parents, I enjoy, I love my family. I'm present with them when I'm with them. I don't go and, so I think I started utilizing, valuing, being grateful for what I have right now.
This is the last question. We have 22 seconds left.
Just 1 second.
Manisha?
Hello, here. Yes, I'm Rani Bilbikar, in theatre director. Well, I would like to tell you that nothing can make you die, because
जावेद अख्तर immortalized you in his poem. लड़की को देखा तो ऐसा
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful audience.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Manisha. Thank you so much.
Put that on social media.
Namaskar.
No problem.
I just wanted to share with my students that who are making